Good morning. Today this is going to be a video that is kind of lots of different videos rolled into one. But firstly, I wanted to have a chat with you as I'm getting ready for the day. Our next door neighbours, I feel like I need to whisper that. Our next door neighbours, not that they can hear me right now, have a film crew in their house at the moment. And I think they're filming a crime drama series either for the BBC or for ITV. Not my neighbours, obviously, they've gone away, but the film crew are there and they're filming that. And I've been peering out of the window this morning, seeing if I can recognise, David Tennant, for instance, who seems to be in every crime drama, which is right and proper because he's brilliant. But I haven't seen him yet, and I haven't seen anybody else that I recognise. Anyway, I'm going to try and be cool about it. So today, I have, actually, where should I begin? Okay, so 5 years ago, I read The Book of Strange New Things by Michel Faber. I think it was actually in my first ever book haul that I filmed 6 years ago. So 6 years ago, I read it. That's where we should begin. 6 years ago, I read The Book of Strange New Things. Here is a clip of that haul where I have all of the hair in the world. And I absolutely adored that book. I devoured it. It is about a man called Peter who travels across the universe to find an alien life form to preach the word of God to them. And it was so atmospheric. There was something about it that reminded me of the scenes in his Dark Materials where Mary Malone meets the Muelfer. Is that what they're called? Anyway, you know what I mean if you've read those books. There was just something about The Book of Strange New Things that was like an expansion of those things. And it's the most amazing speculative fiction. I adored it. I made Mr. M read it. He loved it. Anyway, so I read that book and it was the first book I'd ever read by Michel. And of course, after that, I went and read his other novels. And The Crimson Petal and the White remains one of my favourite historical fiction novels ever. And Under the Skin is creepy, and it's one of those books you can't actually talk about properly because you'll just spoil it. But also, if you've seen the film, because I had seen the film with Scarlett Johansson before reading the book, they're so different and brilliant in their own way. So if you saw one or read one first and you think, well, I've done that now, you haven't. You have to see the counterpart of it and see how it's been interpreted and expanded on in film form in a way that wouldn't fit if it adhered really closely with the book. And I can't remember quite how it happened because it's a long time ago now, but about 5 years ago, Michel had come down to London because he used to live in Scotland, and he was at the Canongate offices. I think it was to read some of the poems from his book Undying, which he was writing because his wife Eva had just passed away. In fact, he was writing The Book of Strange New Things while she was dying, and I didn't know that when I read it, and knowing that afterwards and thinking back on the book just makes it all the more painful. So I went to the Canongate offices and we filmed a video together where we talked about his books. Let me sit down and talk to you properly. There we go, that's better. I can sit on the bed and talk to you. So Michel and I filmed that video and we got on really well and we became friends, and we've stayed in touch these past 5 years, mainly via email because we don't live in the same place, though we have met up occasionally, and obviously especially staying in touch via email in recent months, talking about, important existential crises, but also analysing Fire Saga, the Eurovision film with Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams. He also has a doll who he calls the Intrepid Blonde. And I know that some people find dolls scary, but I delight in the creepiness of dolls. And rather than take a photo of himself in a new place, he will take a photo of the Intrepid Blonde. So he sent me these series of photos where she discovered Franklin and Luna go to the moon in a bookshop. And a few years ago, he sent me the beginning of a new book that he was writing, which was his first children's book, a middle grade book, which came out last week. And it is such a strange time to have a new book out at the moment. So I had said to him, do you want to do a Zoom call, or do you want to join Instagram for a little bit so we can do an Instagram live? Just something where we can talk about the book to you out there. Hi, you, through the camera. Because I thought that would be really nice, and we had such fun recording the video that we did a while ago. But he's not a fan of technology, so he said, I don't really want to do that, but I would love to see you, so I will come to you and we can film something. Which wasn't really something that I had considered because, as you know, I'm shielding, and I have been for coming up to 7 months now. So he can't come in the flat, but I do live right next to my mother-in-law, and she has a garden. So I thought about it and I said to him, well, okay, if you would like to come, that would be lovely. I'm telling you this because the logistics have been interesting, and given that you watch these videos, I thought maybe you would like to know a bit behind the scenes as well. So my mum-in-law has a table that is over 2 meters, great for COVID times. So I can sit at one end, he can sit at the other end, we can catch up and all that stuff. And then I'm gonna put my iPhone camera in front of me, this camera in front of him, and then we can have a chat. And I can film that and somehow edit that together using a split screen so that it doesn't look like we're, you know, really far apart. So that is the plan. And this is the book that we're going to be talking about, which I'll briefly mention before showing you something completely different before getting to him arriving later. And I don't know what time he's coming because he doesn't have a mobile phone. So it's going to be a surprise, is D. So this is his new book. It is about a young girl called Dicolo who is from Somaliland, but people don't believe that she's from there because lots of people haven't heard of it. And they say, don't you mean you're from Somalia? And she's like, no, I'm from Somaliland. She's orphaned and she's been brought up by a couple in Cambersands in the UK. And then one day, the letter D goes missing from the alphabet. And Dicolo is the only person who seems to have noticed that the letter has gone missing. In the sense that everybody else has noticed, they're just not pronouncing the letter D, but only she remembers the letter D ever being there to begin with. She realizes that not is all right in the world, and she starts to investigate. And it begins with a professor who may or may not be dead, and he is blind, and his guide dog is a sphinx, which is pretty amazing. And she gets thrust into this other world where she has to go and save the English language. And what I love in fantasy is when a protagonist's battles in their world, our world, are then hyperbolized and explored in a magical way in the fantastical world that they go into, so that if they can fight it in that obscure place, then when they come back to our world, they are going to be better equipped to fight it in that sense too. And that's what Michel's book does. He has taken inspiration from James Faber's novel about the letter O going missing, which I've actually never read. And there's also references, not explicitly, but little nods to Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz and Narnia. It's classic storytelling. It feels like a warm hug. And there are some creatures in here that remind me of some of the creatures in Under the Skin. And it was just a joy. I felt really bad actually, because a few months ago I had said to him, could you send me your publicist email, because I would love to read it so that we can talk about it. And he said, oh, well, I asked proofs to be sent out in March, and I asked for you to be sent one, but some of them went missing because of COVID. So I just assumed that you had read it and not liked it, and that was why you had never mentioned it. And I felt so bad that for 6 months he thought I'd read it and hated it. But that's how polite a fellow he is. So he is coming round today, and I thought, as I said, it's a weird time to have a book out right now. And as we know, I've been baking a lot recently. So I thought I would make him a present. And my idea is to make book biscuits of his books, and to make some round biscuits with some quotes from D in here. There is an amazing scene, which I'm sure we'll talk about, so I won't go into too much detail about that here, but there's an amazing scene in the book called The Bleak House, and it's a hotel that once you get inside, it changes around you and it's like a maze and you can't get out again. It's the kind of thing I just loved so much in books when I was younger and still love now. And it has messages that pop up on the walls, so I would like to use a few of those, and maybe some of the road signs. Like some of them are watch your speed, but obviously it's now watch your spee because there's no letter D. And I should say also that I believe that Michel particularly wrote this because Transworld approached him and wanted to commemorate 150 years of Dickens' death. So you can see the Dickensian storytelling in here, similar slightly to the Crimson Petal and the White, but completely set in the modern day. I got up really early this morning and made these biscuits here, and now I'm gonna go decorate them. I'll take you with me. whenever I do these biscuits, they always look better in my head than they actually turn out. But I think it's not too bad. It's not too bad. So this is obviously D. We've got the Book of Strange New Things, Undying Under the Skin, the Crimson Petal and the White. And then I've done quite a few of these biscuits which just have D's on them, because in D, the letter D's fly around. And then we've got a couple with quotes on. So this is difficult, and this is what you'll spee. I also did a couple of quotes from Bleak House. Freeze gone with every tea. If no answer, please enter. And when I say Bleak House, I mean the Bleak House within his book, not Dickens' Bleak House. But these are probably my least favourite out of all of them. So depending on when he gets here, I may redo these, or I might just bury them right at the bottom of the tin, because I'm sure that they'll still taste nice. This is editing me inserting this clip here. I didn't film me giving Michel the biscuits because we were just catching up and having a cup of tea, but he did like them, which is good. I was relieved. So this is the chat that we had about D for you, and at the beginning of this he's talking about a non-fiction book that he's working on at the moment about music.
I'm looking at all the aspects of music that sophisticated, well-educated, smart people who really know their music never talk about when they talk about music.
Okay.
Everything that's excluded.
Okay.
Everything that's considered unworthy of attention, naff, we don't go there. So I'm looking at music made especially for small children. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at music used as therapy for people who are unwell or in care homes. There's a huge chapter on whether animals can make music. Mm. I mean, it just looks at lots and lots of things that haven't been looked at that much, and it's potentially vast, and I don't want it to be vast. So I'm going to have to be careful to edit it down, and maybe have to leave out some subjects.
But you can always use those subjects as articles for promoting the book when it comes out.
How very canny of you.
I know, there you go. You're welcome. And
I will employ you as my advisor on this.
Thank you. And are you, because I remember, and you've said this several times, that you don't particularly want to write another novel for adults. So you have, since the Book of Strange New Things, you've now written for children, and you've written poetry, and now doing non-fiction. Are you enjoying exploring lots of different areas?
The children's book was unexpected. So if people want to say, oh, it's a novel, because it's one story that fills an entire book, and that is a novel. Yeah. Therefore...
I hate to tell you, Michelle, but it is a novel.
Yes, yes.
It is.
Of course it is. Yeah. Of course it is. But you'd agree it's a very different kind of thing from...
It's so different, but also I can tell it's by you. And I think...
What makes you tell that it's by me?
Maybe that's a really ambitious statement. If someone handed me this manuscript and I had to guess out of anyone in the world, but I can see the humour in it and the playfulness and the love of classics. So Dickens, especially in this, and that creeps up so much in The Crimson Petal and the White. And I think it's just that traditional storytelling, great storytelling, and also the narrator in this as well reminded me of the narrator in The Crimson Petal and the White, in that it's he or she is leading you astray, coaxing you into the story, and then throwing you into this other world and saying bye. It says in the back that you came up with this idea 35 years ago. Is that right? So how's it grown over time? In
the mid-80s, I I started and didn't finish lots of books. One book that I started was called Woman with Long-Tailed Lorifol. And a lorifol was a kind of creature. Do you know the painting by, is it Leonardo? I think it might be Leonardo, of the woman holding the stoat. You seen that?
I have a vague memory of that.
It's a lovely painting. Anyway,
I'll insert it on the screen right now so everyone can see. There you go.
And they can see that it isn't in fact by Leonardo, and I'm ignorant. Anyway, in this story there is a painting of a woman with a long-tailed lorifol, and it's a different version of that stoat creature. And I thought it was a book for children, but it didn't have any children in it, and the heroine was a world-weary school teacher in her 40s, very depressed about life, very down on modern civilization. And the early chapters are just her dwelling on the crapness of everything. And I was so naive that I just thought, well, you know, it's a fantasy story, so it's a book for children, clearly, with no sense that actually a child would want someone to identify with. And the book got more and more boring as it went on. It just got stultifyingly dull. Then I did an event at a literary festival somewhere where it was like a Jewish masterclass, something like that. And I thought it might be fun to bring along rejection slips that I'd got for my short stories, and also bits of novels that had died. Okay. And to explain to those people why those novels weren't viable, what it was about them that made them doomed to fail. And coming back from that event, I visited my girlfriend, the author Louisa Young, in Shepherd's Bush. And it just so happened that on that occasion her daughter, Isabel Adamako Young, was also there. And just for fun, I read Where She Meets the Professor. And when I'd finished reading the scene, Isabel said, I'd totally read that. And I thought, well, maybe. And of course, irony of ironies, she ended up reading the audiobook.
Oh, did she? I didn't know
that. She
that.
did, yes. So she did totally read that.
She literally and totally read it.
Yes.
And the books that you have not referenced, but kind of sent out love to within this book, I'm sure that I missed some. But the Professor, we felt very like Dickens himself. But Dickens was hugely into ghosts and supernatural, wasn't he? And there's a reference to Alice in Wonderland, and I assume to James Thurber, though I've never read that book about the letter O.
You haven't?
I haven't.
That's
I know
a treat
I haven't.
that's in store for you.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to read that.
Yeah, no, that's an adorable book.
Yeah. And then The Wizard of Oz with the gates and the getting through.
I've never read The Wizard of Oz.
I haven't either. But I tell you what used to terrify me when I was younger was the Return to Oz film. Did you
I haven't
see
seen
that?
Return to Oz.
So she comes back from Oz and no one believes her, so they send her to a psychiatric ward where she's given electric shock treatment.
Oh, good.
I know. And then she goes back into Oz.
That's
and
very YA rather than
Isn't
children.
It?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there are creatures called the Wheelers, and there's the Queen of Oz who's taken over, and she changes her heads, so she has a whole wardrobe full of heads. And my favourite scene is at the end of that film, where Dorothy has to get all of her friends back. They've all been turned into something green. Right. So she has to find...
I love the way you say my favourite scene, since you probably had nightmares about this.
I know. The only scene that did not emotionally scar me was the scene where she had to work out which objects in this room full of green things were her friends. They'd been turned into green objects. And if she guessed correctly, they would be brought back to life. And if she guessed wrong, then they'd be lost forever.
Wow.
And there was something about, obviously, it's not a direct comparison because you haven't seen this film, but there's something with the scene in Bleak House that reminded me of that. This amazing place full of all of these wonderful objects, a house that is alive, that actually wants to consume you. Yeah. But you're still entranced by it. I still want to go to that house, even though it's terrifying.
Well, when she revisits it at the end, and it's trying to get her in with the scones. I mean, thinking of the Green Friends, there was an episode of Doctor Who that really creeped me out when I was a kid. It was during that period when Patrick Troughton played him. So this is going back to the late 60s, and it's a part where his assistant, who at that point is called Jamie, a Scots youngster, loses his face, so his face is completely blank, and the Doctor has to get these sort of identikit eyes and noses, etc., and paste them on the blank face to get Jamie back. And of course,
doesn't quite work.
He doesn't really choose the right nose, etc. So it's a different person.
Like restoring a painting.
Yeah.
And then getting fired.
yeah.
What are some of your favourite scenes to write?
I love the scene with Mr. Pumblechook. And to my great delight, I was able to read that out to a bureaucrat who has spent his life, crunching data and organising paperwork. And he was just so happy to have a representation of a bureaucrat that wasn't implying that bureaucrats are evil and a scourge upon the world, and we'd all be so much better if we just managed to get rid of them. Because even though the chapter plays with the notion that he might end up being a baddie, actually he has her best interests at heart, and he's going to help her out.
He's just an exhausted man sitting in a box.
And I got a great deal of pleasure from that. I mean, it's another kind of... In so much of my work, including my work for adults, there's a lot of wrong footing going on. There's getting people off balance. So in Under the Skin, you've got this heroine that you identify with, but she's doing really, really awful things, and that makes you wonder maybe you should be rooting for the people that she's doing the awful things to, but then you meet some of them and they're really not
great either.
So there is that going on, and there's Sugar's in the Crimson Petal and the White. There's Sugar's confusion, where she's had this really strong crusading working class identity of wanting to destroy the privileged and take her revenge on them, and then she realizes that actually it's nice to be in a warm home, where where things are okay. So that there's all those sorts of off-balancey things going on, and I think in D, I enjoy the fact that creatures that might be thought of as a threat end up being fine, and vice versa.
I was going to say, would you want to read a little bit out?
I'd be happy to. What would you like me to read?
Maybe you can read a little bit from Bleak House, because we've been talking about it.
Okay.
Do you have a copy with you?
I do have a copy, and that means we can be more scrupulous about social distancing.
I was just going to throw it at you, but it might have hit your head, so... Also, I can read along and make sure you're reading the right words.
All right.
All of these rooms were part of the professor's honeycomb-like home. I love that description.
So do you want to go to the really creep-outy part where the house is bullying? Is that what you've got in mind?
Yeah, what page is that? Appreciated the Hansel and Gretel reference as well. Thanks. Because it says it has gingerbread coloured stonework.
But that's not important for the kids.
I know, it's important for me though. Diccolo eats the apple and then she falls asleep. I'm finding
I hadn't thought of that.
No, own it. You meant it. You definitely meant it.
Honour thy mistake as a hidden intention.
What page are you looking on right now?
I'm looking at page 118.
Oh, I know. Yep.
Diccolo opened the door, expecting to see the corridor outside. To her puzzlement, she saw another bedroom, just as big as theirs, but with different patterned wallpaper and different furniture and an untouched bed. She blinked and rubbed her eyes. She'd been exhausted last night and must have misremembered which door they'd entered through. She walked to the opposite end of their bedroom, where there was a second door, and opened that. No corridor was revealed there either. Just another bedroom, different from the others. A piano with a silver candelabrum on it stood near the window, and instead of a double bed there were two single ones. Diculo's stomach felt queasy, from hunger and also from a sort of weird not rightness. Cautiously she stepped into the new bedroom. Mrs. Robinson padded behind her. A plaque above the piano said, "We regretfully request that guests refrain from playing the piano. It is antique and fragile. Thank you, the management." On impulse, Diculo lifted the lid of the keyboard. Inside the lid was another very small plaque which said, "Failure to take proper notice of notices may result in penalties or other consequences. Thank you, the management." At the far end of the room was another door. Diculo and Mrs. Robinson passed through it and found themselves in yet another fancy chamber. Not a bedroom this time, but some sort of dining room, with numerous round tables shrouded with white tablecloths and folded napkins. A large metal trolley stood ready on the patterned wooden flooring. There was no food anywhere to be seen. A blue plaque said, "Throughout the winter months, breakfast is by prior arrangement only. Please apply in writing stating any allergies. Thank you, the management." Diculo and Mrs. Robinson hurried to the next door, which led into a kitchen. The highest standards of hygiene clearly applied here, and every surface was sparkling clean, even the hobs and knobs on the cooker. The cupboards contained a few essential cooking ingredients like flour, bicarbonate of soda, salt, pepper and vinegar, but certainly nothing that was in any danger of going bad if left for a long time. Indeed, nothing edible. Even the bin was empty and smelled of nothing. A blue plaque said, "Please note that for health and safety reasons, guests are not to enter the kitchen. We will punish infractions severely. This means you. Thank you, the management." "Let's go back," said Diculo. She and Mrs. Robinson retraced their steps out of the kitchen, re-entering the dining room. Except it wasn't the dining room anymore. It was a chamber with many shelves, crammed with bed linen, towels, pillows, and spare duvets. The blue plaque said, "If you are not warm enough, please contact a member of staff rather than filching supplies from in here. What is wrong with you people? You're not in your own uncouth primitive country now. Thank you, the management." The next room, to Diculo's relief, was a bedroom. But on closer inspection, it was not any of the bedrooms they'd been in so far. Mrs. Robinson ran to the window and leapt up, placing her paws on the ledge. She looked out and hissed. Diculo stood next to her. The view outside was exactly the same as the one they'd seen from the bedroom they'd spent the night in. The fountain, the stone horse with its beard of icicles. On the door leading to the next room hung a blue plaque that said, "Staying in this house is a privilege, not a right. Non-payment is an abuse of our hospitality, and we will not tolerate such abuse. Please pay all bills now. Thank you, the management." The next room was yet another bedroom, different again from all the others. The decor had a bird theme. That is, there were bird designs on the duvet and paintings of ducks on the walls, and little gold robins embossed on the wallpaper, and a woven wicker wastepaper basket in the shape of a swan. Mrs. Robinson ran to the window, jumped up again and hissed. Then she leapt onto the bed and lunged at the wall behind it, knocking a mirror off its hook. The mirror fell behind the bedhead with an ugly crash, while the Sphinx tore at the walls with her claws. Scraps and curls of the wallpaper flew into the air, followed by fragments of plaster. For about a minute, the Sphinx flailed in a frenzy before finally falling back onto the mattress, panting. The wall had been gouged deep,
revealing solid stone beneath the plasterwork. Then, just as Dicolo was about to look away, she noticed the edges of the torn wallpaper twitching and trembling. Fresh wallpaper was starting to grow, repairing the damage. A blue plaque under one of the paintings of ducks said, "The Fleet Room is among the most popular with our guests. Many famous personages over the centuries have gone insane here. Prints of the paintings suitable for framing can be bought at the gift shop on your way out. Thank you. The management."
This has been so lovely, thank you.
It's so lovely, the idea that we have both been in lockdown and across the length of this table that we can make something like this happen and then share it with other people. I mean, what's not to like?
Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please do check out Michel's book D, and if you haven't read his other books, or if middle grade is not your thing and you prefer to read adult books, then check out Under the Skin, Crimson Petal and the White, and the Book of Strange New Things. They are so good. You might remember that I did my favourite books of the past 5 years, and I went through everything that I'd read in the last 5 years, and the Book of Strange New Things was still number one. That's how good it is. Okay, I hope you're all having a good week, and I will speak to you very soon. Lots of love. Bye.